it actually made it worse, as I understand it. So, he really didn't think much of that, and he thought about what was going on, and he did his own research, and he came up with his own treatments, his own supplement regimen, and he totally eliminated his symptoms of diabetes. And indeed now, he's in his 60s, he still has exactly no symptoms of diabetes, which is pretty cool, really. So, I've got a lot of time to the idea that we already have therapies that are around that can address, that can, if you like, normalize the rate of aging of people who, for whatever reason, have drawn some short straws, who are, aging unusually rapidly in some way or other. But where I don't agree with Ray, where I don't have nearly his optimism, is with regard to the extent to which we can postpone the ill health of old age in people who are already doing pretty averagely well, in people who are going to get to 70 or 80, in pretty good health, whatever happens. For those people, I think at the moment, the balance of evidence is that we can only make a very small amount of difference to how long people are going to stay healthy and therefore how long people are going to stay alive. And if we take me, I'm at the other end of the spectrum. I have the good fortune I've been able to get tested a few times over the years for all manner of different, aspects of my metabolism, 150 different things in my blood and so on. And I always come out incredibly good for my age, way younger than my actual age. So for me, I have to, of course, take the view that if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I have to really, be even more conservative than the average person would be.
Why do you think we have extra and intracellular junk in our system, and what is that, and how does that come to be? Because I notice those are the 2 of the 7 deadly sins.
Right. Okay. So this is, again, straightforwardly side effects of metabolism. And in this case, it's side effects that are very easy to describe in concrete terms because it is actual material, molecular garbage. What it is basically molecular byproducts of particular metabolic processes, byproducts that, for whatever reason, the body does not have the machinery to actually destroy or indeed to excrete. So that machinery, that material simply accumulates in the cell or indeed in the spaces between cells. And, initially, like other types of damage, it's harmless, but eventually it gets in the way and causes serious problems. So, if we take an example, we can take cholesterol. Cholesterol itself is not a harmful molecule. It's a molecule that the body does know how to metabolize, how to move around the body, and how to use in a productive way. But it's not something that stays the same. Unfortunately, cholesterol is quite a reactive molecule, and it has a tendency to get into different states, in particular to be oxidized, to become slightly different molecules which the body does not know how to handle so well. And when we get that sort of thing happening, we get the accumulation of such material in the cell. So a fine example of this happens in the walls of our arteries. We get essentially particles of cholesterol stuck in the artery, and we have cells called macrophages that go into the artery wall to deal with those particles, and they deal with those particles pretty well, by and large, but those particles are slightly contaminated by oxidized derivatives of cholesterol, and those derivatives eventually poison the macrophages, the white blood cells that have gone into the artery wall, so that they cease to work. They become what's called a foam cell, which is the first visible sign of an atherosclerotic plaque. And that is essentially why we get atherosclerosis, cardiovascular disease, heart attacks, and strokes. If that didn't happen, if our cells could metabolize all of the oxidized derivatives of cholesterol just as happily as our cells already metabolize cholesterol itself, then we simply wouldn't get atherosclerosis.
Do you see similarly a way to have nanobots clean up the junk in our cells and outside the cells?
I think that nanomachines, or indeed, much more generally, let's just talk about non-biological solutions to medical problems, are absolutely legitimate. I think it's only a matter of time before we develop such things. And I think that as time goes on, non-biological solutions to medical problems will play an increasing role in the panoply of medicine, not just for aging, but for for age-related and age-independent diseases alike. However, my own feeling is that we're quite some way off from making that happen. And therefore, I think that what we need to do in order to make sure that those of us who have the misfortune already to be alive are going to survive long enough is to develop the more traditional biotechnological solutions using enzymes and such like to get rid of this stuff reasonably well to keep us going long enough so that these nanobots or whatever are actually developed in the first place.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Almost like a transition phase before they come in.
Right. If we go back to Ray Kurzweil's work, you probably remember that in Fantastic Voyage he talked about 3 bridges. He talked about bridge 1 being the stuff we can do now, which, as I mentioned, is an area where personally I feel that he's substantially too optimistic. Then bridge 2, which is essentially biotechnology to regenerate the body, which is more or less exactly the work that I do. And then bridge 3, which is these non-biological solutions.
Got it. So you see enzymes playing a role potentially in...
Oh, absolutely. Our approach to getting rid of junk is basically to introduce into the body enzymes that come from other species, especially from bacteria. You see, we make our own enzymes. We make lots and lots of enzymes, but we only make particular enzymes. And it turns out that we don't make enzymes that are capable of breaking down these things that accumulate during our life and that cause these eventual diseases. So our job here is to introduce new enzymes that we may find in other species, especially in bacteria, that will be able to change that, to augment our ability to break things down. And that's actually, if anything, our flagship project within the SENS Foundation, back in the research center in Mountain View that we have, and also in one of the labs that we fund in Texas at Rice University. We've got people beavering away, identifying such enzymes and identifying what they do and how they do it, and introducing them into mammalian cells, into our own cells, at the moment only in cell culture, not in actual clinical trials, so as to eventually, get rid of this stuff.
I have a question about this. The years and years ago, let's say 30 years ago, actually 40 years ago, there was a woman a pioneer named Ida Rolf, who spent a lot of time looking at the fascia that holds the muscles and joints and different parts of the body together. And she's way past on, but her pioneering time, when she began to say, look, the fascia is not normally looked at. It's just considered just stuff, just stuff in the body. What was considered stuff and not relevant became very relevant in her structural integration model. And my question to you, similar to like an Ida Rolf scenario, Dr. Ida Rolf, is could the intracellular junk and extracellular junk, could we later find out that they were of some value, or do you know for sure 1,000% there's no value to it?
That's an excellent question.
Thank you.
So let's go with the fascia that you're talking about.
Yes.
So that's actually not so much junk. It's more material, part of the extracellular matrix, the lattice of proteins that hold our cells and tissues together, that breaks down in a way that needs to be fixed. And that's a different problem. That's a problem that ultimately comes down to cross-linking. And I'll come back to that later if you like. But with regard to the junk that I'm talking about, we can be pretty sure that we are going to have benefits, or at least not do harm, by the approaches that we're taking here. So if we take intracellular junk specifically, the place in which we want to improve the degradation of these various types of material is a part of the cell called the lysosome. Now, the lysosome is a garbage disposal machinery. It's a membrane-bounded bag, really, which is very acidic, 2 pH units more acidic than the rest of the cell, and it's full of enzymes that break things down. And yes, we can be absolutely sure that nothing that ever goes into the lysosome is ever intended to come out again. So if we introduce enzymes into the lysosome that were not there before, that allow the lysosome to break down stuff that it was not previously able to break down, that it instead just simply sequestered, then we know that we are not going to be doing any harm. We know that all that's going to happen is that the lysosome will not accumulate garbage in the cell.